Welcome to the podcast, everyone. This is Marianne, and I'm here with a very, very special guest. So he is super experienced in dealing with young people. He has been the director of student affairs for a university for 12 years. So kudos for that, because that must have been super difficult. And then he left that position to become a PhD in school safety and what is it? What was it? High risk decision making, right?
Yeah, high stakes decision making in the military, in education, and also in healthcare.
Cool. And he has been on TV. So we are just a podcast. So we're having a famous person in front of us. He has written a script on safety, and he's writing a book. And he has a podcast. So welcome, David Perrodin.
Yes.
Right? Yes. To our podcast. I'm like so pleased to have you here.
The pleasure's all mine. I love the Sustainable Living podcast, and I'm honored to be a guest. Thank you.
Cool. So first off, before we want to talk today a little bit about your personal journey, how I already said you have done so much in your life already, and you're moving into more and more interesting directions. But since we mentioned that you have a podcast, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your podcast and how listeners can find you.
Yeah, thanks. On Twitter, at Safety PhD is the way to follow me and get updates about the podcast. safetyphd.com is my website, and that's the clearinghouse for the podcast. There's a blog that goes with it, some articles that I've written, so things of that nature. I'm on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Blueberry, pretty
Everywhere.
easy. Yeah,
Good.
pretty easy to find me. So yeah, and I do one podcast a week. It is safety themed. I do agency and purpose, about personal safety, mental health, depression, but also physical safety. I did a podcast last night, which will be released, in that studies the Murrah building bombing and the World Trade Center attacks, and how those two are substantially different, even though they were just 6 years apart. So just kind of all over the place with
Wow.
a number of guests too. About half my shows I have guests in various expertise areas of safety. So yeah.
Yeah, so definitely, I know that in our podcast, we have talked about personal safety and preparedness a lot. And this is really what you do in your show a lot is, not prepared. Well, you do also do preparedness if there's a doomsday kind of situation. But a lot of it is about personal being ready for, we just talked about, said, where David is sitting, there's rain coming down, and they're expecting 4 inches of rain, and we might hear some thunder in the background. I'm sitting in a complete drought. So,
oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah, in California, it doesn't rain in California, So I was saying for us, 4 inches of rain would be a disaster. We're talking water in everywhere,
wow.
It's just, yeah. We had 2 inches last winter. That's the only time it rains here. And the garage was flooded. My neighbors had to run pumps to try to get stuff away. So, yeah. So definitely, you even talk about those kind of preparedness at times in your podcast. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So if you're listening, which of course you are listening, if you're hearing our voices, make sure you check out David's podcast. I highly recommend it. So we had talked prior about a great personal journey you have done. And do you want to start maybe with when you were the director of student affairs and how your life was like at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I talked to you and we developed the kind of the outline for this show, it was January of 2014 was this monumental point in my life where it just, my life went in a completely different direction, which was unanticipated, but was absolutely what was needed for me. So I've been a director of student services for a dozen years, and in that capacity, working with students with disabilities, families, and very rewarding. I love the job, but very, very demanding and high stress. And people would bring in advocates. Issues would go on where, I mean, you'd have to have your phone on 24 hours a day, and you'd just be bombarded by emails and voicemails. And after a while, it started to affect me. I would say from, like a deficit perspective. I was very good at my job, but every day you anticipated something negative was going to happen, and it typically did, and you'd have to deal with it and support people around you who'd be dealing with that. So, but yeah, that was 12 years, of my life, and I completed my doctoral program out of UW-Madison, all of my courses, and reached a point where then I needed to go in and actually do the field study, and a lot of people stop actually once they complete their courses. They don't go on and complete the PhD. They call it ABD, all but doctorate. So I went in and just switched totally out of what I was doing, devoted my life to 2 years of research through a fellowship, got to be an expert, and just life went in a completely different direction for me, and in a great way, really in a great way.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, just having your phone on 24 hours and expecting an emergency anytime, right there, that's like hugely stressful. And you also have a family, right?
Yeah. I thank you. In the next week from today is my youngest daughter's birthday. She'll turn 7. So a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old. And I was becoming really disconnected from my family, long hours. And this is probably pretty typical of a lot of people. I think what's unique for me is I had the opportunity when I was about 40, 41 years old to make this change in my life. And I think for a lot of people, it doesn't happen until they retire. And you look back and it's like, oh my goodness, my kids are grown. And, I never really got to know them. I never got to do things with them. And I never developed my own interest. And here I am and all these great years are gone. And my body's broken down by stress and so forth. So yeah, a young family. I was getting home late. I'd be tired. I would get home, fire up the computer, log into the system at work, check emails. And there was a time we were on vacation. We just got back we had 2 family vacations we took already this year. Yesterday we were at the splash pad. The last week we've been at the basketball court as a family, my wife and I, my 2 daughters, and just doing fun things we could have never done before because I wouldn't have been home, first of all. But we were on vacation maybe 6-7 years ago, and I remember there was this rural little restaurant, and they had a train that came through and it delivered your food, and so it'd pull up in front of you and the plate would be on it. And my daughter was into Thomas the Train, I think, or at that time, and she's maybe 3-4 years old, and we're all excited to go to this place. And we pull up, and my phone rings, and there was an issue going on back in the organization, and I couldn't put it off. Like it was very intense at that moment. So I told my wife, take the girls in, and she did, and I never made it in. I had to stay out in the vehicle, deal with this. And then at that moment, it's ruined. I mean, I didn't get to experience that. I'll never go back and get to experience that. But then it's not like you can just shut it off, because I knew I kind of played the role of being, the dad and doing things with the kids. I think we still were going to like a beach that day. But in my mind, I'm thinking, as soon as I get home, I have to log on, and there's going to be all these emails, and I'm going to be blind carboned and carbon copied. And then I'm going to have to come up with a response. I'm going to have to call people tonight yet. In the morning, another round of this will happen. And the stress was just unreal. And I had friends who did the same job, and they would say that one time we were sitting around and they said, do you sleep on Sunday nights? And I said, wow, that's an odd thing to ask. I'm like, no, really, I don't. And they're like, no, we don't sleep either. Like, how do you, once you get into the late Sunday, you anticipate what's going to happen on Monday. So you're going in and checking your email and you're trying to prep yourself. And usually on Mondays, it's always like a whole administrative team meeting. And those typically, again, aren't positive.
That's how you put it. Very
So,
nice.
you know,
They aren't positive.
no, they're not. I mean, it's all the issues. And the thing is, I would always, like you'd have mission statements in the organization, like we'll have fun, we'll be, and those would never happen. And if you even smiled or had that hint of fun, people would be like, how are you not taking this serious? Like, what's happening? I mean, it could be something like a pen dries up on you, and as you're writing something, and you just kind of laugh because you didn't have another one with you. Well, something like that could be perceived as others that you're making light of, like this whole stress that the situation is under. Everybody has limited resources and things, and everybody was so touchy and edgy all the time, and that just transferred to me, and it was something. When I finally did leave the position, my parents said to me, every time the phone rang and it would come up with your caller ID, we kind of look at each other like, who's going to answer it? Because David is going to be negative. He's going to be upset about something, and I didn't realize I was transferring what was happening to me onto others, onto my family, and I feel really bad about that. I feel like I've reconciled that, and but I didn't. And I had a really good friend I sat down with, and I said, "Tell me honestly." And she's like, "Yeah, your emails are just, you could just sense the anger and all of this stuff, and you weren't really an uplifting person to be around." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that just broke me." I felt, and it was just really sad. I know we talked previously.
Yeah, but I think you just made such a huge point, because being in a stressful situation, like I said, really affects our whole being. And we talk a lot about, and I think you also do in your podcast about, you talk about depression, you talk about those things, and they have roots in life. And if you're in so much stress, it's very hard to now be an uplifting person to somebody else. And now when we take it further, I mean, not saying that you are taking it further, but there are people which express their stress in a very negative manner. And that's kind of what you are trying to prevent, right? So it's having this insight in your own life, what this kind of environment can do to you in your personal relationship is so powerful. And it's probably really helpful for you in your further work, I would think.
It is. And actually, as I talk about this today, I have never shared this story publicly before. I was really guarded about it because I looked at it initially as a personal failure. I mean, I had always risen to the challenge. Like I was, after the Sandy Hook massacre of 2012, I was the person that did the PBS presentation about school safety that aired in all of the states in Canada multiple times, and I had always just felt I could rise and could rise above these forces, and I sat down with my doctor, and she said, and she was younger than I was, and she said, "David, your health is horrible. You're overweight by like 40, 50 pounds." And I did send a picture that you can share on the blog or whatever.
Yeah, we will.
Goes along, because the picture shows that I was obese, and I just looked bad at what was the pinnacle of my career in student services. And I actually have it right in front of me. One thing is my doctor, in a recent checkup, printed this off and gave it to me, and she said, your risk in the next 10 years of heart disease or stroke, so I'm 45, is 1.4%. She said, which is like super, super, super low. And she said that 1.4% was about 40% before you left the job.
Oh, wow.
that you would have that. So she said, I wouldn't have been surprised at all if you would have had a heart attack or stroke. My blood pressure was crazy. My cortisol levels, like in your blood, your stress, like they never left. I had mono for 8 months. I couldn't get over it. It was just nonstop to the doctor, and that's all gone too. But yeah, so I'm doing this public TV presentation, which really went well, and I'm watching it, and I'm looking and looking at this person wearing this large sport coat, and my face is kind of blotchy, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, like I was terrified at what I saw, and then my doctor is telling me too. She said, Dave, you're not taking care of yourself, and I can tell you're not happy, and I didn't find there wasn't any way out. I mean, it was I didn't know. I felt trapped. And I think people get that way in careers, especially when things you start to gain that.
Absolutely.
I remember, yeah. I
So
felt trapped.
when you did make that step, did you have made that realization already, or did you use your dissertation as kind of your lifeline excuse that your subconscious gave you a way out to be able to leave that job behind?
Yeah, I realized before I left the job, probably about 6 months before I left it, every morning when I got up, it was just like, can I get through this day? All the plates are spinning, and it was going to fall. I knew it was going to collapse, that either physically I was going to give out, mentally I was going to give out, and I just knew I couldn't keep doing it. And then we had, and it turned out to be, as people would say, a blessing in disguise, I guess. We had a change in administration, and that was one of the things too that prompted me to seriously look at, did I want to stay in where I was at with that change in administration, which wasn't a good match for me. One of the things that before I left, I remember going to a meeting and I had to play the role of the tough person, representing the organization, and we had advocates and parents and other people from the outside, and they were advocating for a student with a disability, and I had to represent again the organization and just make sure that what they were asking and what we could provide, we could come to an agreement on that. And I remember during this meeting that I just got so upset that I felt our staff was being attacked, and I just kind of let loose. And when I walked out of this meeting, I'm calling a lot of people out and things like that. My staff is like, oh, this is great. You stood up for us. And I remember the principal on the way to the parking lot, or at the meeting, this other administrator is telling me, that was great. Like, that was, boy. And I felt horrible. That wasn't me. That was the acting me of having to go so much against what I felt inside. And I felt awful. And I'm like, this is the way life is going to be. Like, I'm going to have to come in and just be this bad, person, or it felt so natural. So yeah. So that, and then I realized that I tried to do the dissertation is wild. It's like a 200-page document. You have to do tons and tons of research. And I couldn't do it like in the current job. I couldn't get home and log in, do a little bit of family time and stuff, and then try to do like a dissertation from 12 midnight to 2 in the morning. So it was this point where it needed to be a clean break. And it was very unknown on the other side for me what was going to happen. Thankfully, I had support of my family, and but it was really, it was hard, but at the same time, like, it was this weight that was lifted off. Mentally, I didn't miss the position at all. Not one part of the position. And I can talk about what happened too, right after that, which is very interesting. And again, maybe people have experienced this, but it was something for me, like being as, I guess, strong and accomplishing all these things, in my career. And then suddenly not having that, to kind of delaminate from that of that wasn't me anymore. But
yeah, I think that would be really interesting, because I feel So you made a choice to leave your position. There are people which want to make that choice and feel they can't, like a little bit like you said that you didn't see a way out for a while, where you knew this was really stressful, but you couldn't see different. And also people are with their self-worth a lot of times so attached to a certain position. You had a certain amount of create just by having that title and by being in that position. So how did you deal with now being not the director of student services?
That's a great question, and it's something I had always aspired to have this position with this one organization for years, and finally this position had opened up. And I went and, applied, and a number of people applied, and I got this position. And it was one of those things, too, where I think it was this whole thing, and I talk about this in my book, Lessons of Lower Manhattan, this transference dynamic of I really was just so enamored with the position that I never really studied how I would fit the position. And I was willing to accept a lot of things with the position that necessarily weren't a good fit for me, just because, again, I was in this organization that I had admired from the outside, and there were a lot of great things with the organization. It just wasn't a good fit for me. I should have probably never left the organization I was with, which was a great fit. But this was, again, a perceived step up the ladder in again, a bigger organization, more resources, things like that. So once this is done, I mean, it's done. It's like and the strange thing too is, like, people in the organization, some of them will continue to contact you and want to associate with you, and others it's done. Once you leave, like, you've either abandoned them, or it's some strange psychology. Even like people I would reach out to that I would consider friends, and it's like, no, once you're gone, you're gone. I'm like, so that was kind of weird. And it was, you get up in the morning. And I was used to getting up and, of course, going to work in the long days. And suddenly that wasn't there. I'm getting up, and I am going to our local library with my backpack, just like a 18-year-old kid. And almost, it's all filled with, research documents I'm going through, and just to, get out of the house. And I really struggled because it just wasn't my thing. And I added into that routine. My oldest daughter at the time was in second grade, and the school was a few blocks from our house. And I would get up and I would walk her to school. And in that 2 blocks, she would tell me things that I never even knew about her, or the things that were going on in her life. And I always make sure I was there at the end of the day to pick her up and walk her home. And it was so meaningful for me. And I am so blessed that I had that time, that she'd come out of school with a big smile, running and, saying bye to her friends and hand me her backpack. And, Dad, I did this today. Or, hey, open up the backpack. I have this drawing of whatever, or, I've got my clay turtle, or whatever it is. And I'm like, looking back, I'm like, I'm so glad I got to do that. But the nights would set in for me initially, and I'd kind of freak out because, my routine was so different, and I felt like I just felt very anxious. So 2 things started to happen probably within like 1 or 2 weeks of me leaving this position, like after probably what a normal time off would be if you were vacation going somewhere again. And there really was no vacation because you're always connected. But I had this anxiety set in, and of course it's Wisconsin. And I left the position at the semester. So it's winter, it gets dark at 4:00 and it's cold. And I would go to the local Walmart and I would walk the aisles just to have light. And I was anxious. And then I did that for a few weeks, like just at night, because it just strange feeling. And then I started to walk. Like I would bundle up. And again, we're talking, like might be like 0 degrees out, and it didn't matter if it was like, wind chill of whatever. I would just bundle up and I would leave and I would walk at night. Yeah, and I had like a reflective vest and a flashlight, things people should do if they do stuff like this. And I'd walk around our town It's a town of 10,000 people, so it would take me maybe like 3-4 hours. I did that every night. And I didn't realize why I was doing this. I didn't realize at all why I'm doing this walking. My mind is not like processing through things. It was just blank. I was just kind of taking in the environment. Like I remember very clearly, that the snow would wisp across fields, and I could see the patterns, in the moonlight. And as it would hit me, and it would kind of wrap around me and go past me. And I remember listening and hearing, deer walking through the woods, because I would kind of go off in patterns and just things you never would tune into. And, the starlight so all of a sudden, then I started to process in my mind, like who I was, what I wanted to be, kind of this whole Zen thing. And I did what everybody does. I bought all the Zen books. My friends are sending.
And actually, your walking was a Zen thing. I mean, when you were saying it, it's like, oh yeah, you practice mindfulness.
Yeah.
Copied with, coupled with exercise. So, walking meditation.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was happening, looking back, my body, I believe, was just screaming to me of get out and get me healthy, David, get me healthy. My body, the soma and the psyche were not connected. And I lost this massive amount of weight, like really fast, just by cutting out the stress and not eating fast food at 8 o'clock at home if you get, you're getting home. And I lost like all of this weight, which it hasn't come back. I just got down to what my normal weight, I guess, should be. And my thinking, and then I started to have what I would call appreciations, where I was just finding myself thankful for, like, I'd walk and be like, I'm thankful that I'm out here and I'm healthy. I'm thankful for tonight and being able to, that it's a full moon and the stars are out. And I would even go out. The only time I wouldn't go out at night, and this is to this day, is if it's like severe weather. That was it. If it was raining, I put a rain jacket on, and I would watch. I would pay attention to things like the pavement, the asphalt, where you don't realize, but it's arched a little bit. So as the rain hits it, it goes off on the left side and the right side. And it's just this neat pattern in the way that the streetlights, as the rain goes past the streetlights, and just these little things I started to notice. And again, I found myself talking out loud of just like, I'm thankful for this, I'm thankful for that. And I started to process through, and I still do that to this day. It's kind of funny because as I go past, if anyone, I go past, I have to pretend I'm talking on a phone. So you're like, hey, it's the crazy guy who talks to himself. What's going on?
I love it. You just gave a full therapy session, how to heal anxiety. Thank you so much. You got into mindfulness, the gratitude. It's great. And it's so amazing that you just intuitively got to that place of, finding those ways of healing. Because it sounds like you were so damaged by so much stress. And stress does, as we know, more and more research is done, what negative effects stress can have on the body, on the mind, on the soul. So this is great. I love it how you became your own therapist.
It was amazing, in how the body tells you what it needs. And again, I didn't have that conscious connection to what was really happening, but my body, by getting out and doing that walking, and then it brought forward into the consciousness. And I felt so resilient too. Like, things could happen in life and I knew that I could handle them and get through them. And one of the things I had watched my PBS presentation, and I remember at the start they said, how do you want to be introduced? So I typed up this, like 2-page thing. It's like, list every accomplishment I've ever had in my entire life. And so they start off and they're reading that. And I felt so, I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, like, that just seems bragging. Like, that just seems like that person at that time, the David at that time, was so laminated to these accomplishments. And that's what defined me. I didn't come up and have them say, David likes or studies this, likes to spend time with his family, doing vacations to beaches and playing basketball with them and stuff. There was nothing like that. David loves to bike. That's something I got into too, is I did a lot of biking. But it was all this, very specific, serious job stuff to put your credentials out there. And it's so funny because even today, I have people that I interview on my show, and before I interview them, they'll tell me I'm nervous because you have a PhD and I've watched some of your stuff, and I'm like, whoa, like don't worry about it. Like I'm not laminated for this title. I'm glad of what I've done, and I've been on TV and stuff like that. But I said, no, like look at you. I'm interviewing because of what you're bringing to the show. But I've had a couple of people say that, and I just get a kick out of it because I'm like, oh my goodness.
But that's kind of how we have been functioning as a society, to value credential over everything else. And I find it really interesting that especially a lot of men seem to be making that shift now to not be so attached to the title anymore, but to look more at different values in their life. Like I heard you talk about your children and how you value being a present father, stuff like that, which didn't used to be something a man could really say. Don't you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree that, it definitely has connected me a lot more with my children. And actually, my youngest daughter will enter, middle school this year. So, but I love the things that we do, and I love the discussions that we have, and just the activities, and being present with them, and doing things with one, having just a time that I'm going to do a bike ride with this daughter, or, this daughter and I, or we'll do something else. But yeah, it's meant so much to me. And an aha moment was about 4 months after, or maybe it was a little longer than that, but after I left this high stress position, my wife set up the garage for a garage sale, rummage sale, and which she does, every year. And I was outside taking some pictures of it so we could put it on Craigslist and say, we have this garage sale coming up. And anyway, I'm looking, and there's this whole area of toys. And I'd pick them up and hold them and say, when did we have this? Whose is this? Is this, which daughter did this? I don't even remember this. And I remember there was like a tea set, little plastic teacups in that. And I'm like, and my wife's like, well, that was in, my one daughter had that for 2-3 years. And I'm like, I never did a tea party with her. And a lot of these toys, I didn't even know they existed. And again, it was one of these hard hitting moments maybe you're right. Maybe as a male, we don't talk about this a lot. Cause with my male friends, I had one friend I could really talk about, what I was kind of feeling. And I said, I felt just so bad. I never did these things, and I didn't even know these toys existed. And I just sat, and it was a crushing moment. But now it's something where, I'm very much into with my daughters, doing things and making sure that taking an interest, in what they're doing, like if it's a game of Uno, that we sit down and we play a game of family Uno or things like that. So yeah, I'll never forget being in the garage. I mean, it's just like it's frozen in my mind, this image of me like looking and holding these and no expression on my face, and almost wanting to just like close the door and just like cry because I had lost out on this stuff and times I would never get back. I mean, it was tough.
Yeah, I believe it. It just is interesting to me because I have other friends which have left the corporate world, so to speak, to be more with their family. And it's not an easy move. And I fear, especially our audience, there are so many people which want that, but are not necessarily seeing how to survive on the other side of that jump. Right. And I think, if you look at what it costs to live, and if you're conservative, and actually things don't mean a lot to me. Things,
I want to have a few nice things, but things don't mean a lot to me. And the people I had worked with in the corporate world, it was, someone would show up with a $85,000, $100,000 car. Well, and 2 weeks later, someone else would have something similar. And I never kind of subscribed to that, or very expensive, clothing and things like that. I mean, it was all of this weird competition thing too. But yeah, for me, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter to me. Like I think I've evolved beyond that, maybe. So that's been really fun, for me too. Is I don't have this wanting of material items. I don't go on Amazon and put together a big list of things and stuff like that. Even like when I bought my studio arm here for my podcasting, which I love doing and I think reaches people. And it's become a great hobby as far as, and also I think a public service, and for me I think therapeutic too. It was kind of like, do I really need this or don't I need this? But no, I'm like, no, I'm going to get it because it's helps me out with my work here podcasting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is a lot of that status thinking, and we need to do more. And living in California, of course, just to have a place to live in is very expensive. Kind of like New York City and some other places. You need a certain amount of income just to be able to have a roof over your head, so to speak. But those are choices too people sometimes make. I have friends which moved away from here, though they could be more with their kids or pursue more what they considered important in life besides just working. But you still keep very busy. So
yeah, it's things I'm doing now I never would have imagined that I'd be doing. And before I get into that, I want to share something that happened to me too, kind of, which was in this transition out of being this laminated. And this is a term I just came up with, this laminated personality, which I would describe as, if someone asks you who you are, and if you're saying, I am an accountant with whatever firm or whatever, if that's how you're responding, you have a laminated personality. If you're responding, I love biking, and I am married and have 3 children, and I work with whatever. I mean, if that's part of a discussion, then I think you're delaminated. But I think that's a very distinct way. Like if you just pay attention to how you're describing yourself, and you're putting it out there of like this job title, and that's what I was doing. But I had a friend I'd worked with early in my career, and she developed cancer and terminal cancer, and I went to visit her. And this was about it was less than a year after I had left the. No, it was probably about 3-4 months after I'd left the position. So I'm questioning myself a little bit still. I'm still finding my way. I'm working on my dissertation, and that was a struggle too, because my mind, I had done a lot of technical writing, but writing in a dissertation is completely different. But I visit my friend Connie, who I know in a long time, has terminal cancer. And she's at her house in her hospital bed by her window, so she can look out. And again, she only has at that point months to live. And I go up and see her, and we have just a great time. Like I had worked with her again early in my career. We stayed in contact through email and things like that. And she had lost her hair, but it had a wig on, and it's something that really struck me. Like I showed up, and she made sure like that her family had, like some snacks for me and things like that. I'm like, oh my goodness, like you're terminal cancer. You only have, don't worry about me. Like I'm here just to see you. And she wanted just to make me feel so welcome. And I sat and we had this great time. And as I left, she said to me, today's the last day I'll ever see you. And I said, no, I'll come back. And she said, no, I don't want you to come back. And she said, here's why. Like, this was so great today. And if you come back and see me, I'm going to be, emaciated. I'm probably going to be, drugged. I'm not going to know who you are. I'm going to have IVs. And I don't want you to see me that way. Like, I want you to remember this, and this is how I want to remember you. And that was, again, one of these reflective moments. And I drove home, and it was about 2 hours to drive home, and I had the radio off, and I just thought about that. And and she passed away a few months later, and I miss her because her sense of humor was just awesome. But I thought, what a level of respect for her also to have that discussion with me. And sometimes people say to me, boy, that sounds really cold that somebody would do that. I'm like, no, actually, it was really respectful, and really, we had this great time, and I can totally see where she's coming from. And again, it was this moment where I'm saying, we're about the same age. Like, this could be me. And am I getting the most out of life? Am I grabbing life and getting everything I can? Because she still was. I mean, she was making sure with her grandkids, she was doing it as much as she could. She's getting on the laptop and connecting up with people. And so, yeah, I'm like, wow. When you lose somebody close and similar in your age, again, it was this moment where I'm like, forget it. The small things I'm not going to sweat.
For sure. And I think a lot of people come to SAD when they are hit with disease themselves. So you were kind of just getting out in time, right? When your doctor was telling you had a 45% chance of, having a heart attack. So, and seeing somebody close, it just really reminds you what is really important. Like we feel, oh, if we don't do this, the world is coming to a standstill. It's not, it's the world goes on, and we have to make daily choices. How do we want to show up in that world? So, yeah, I really like that you point out how quickly our life can be gone, and so to be very conscious about what do we do every single day with our lives? What's important,
Yeah, absolutely. And so once I delaminated from this, all of a sudden, some new opportunities start in that I never even thought were out there. I was contacted by a representative for David Obst, and David Obst is a Hollywood producer, Pulitzer Prize winning author for the LeMay Massacre, which involved the Vietnam War. So really, this high-profile Hollywood producer gets in contact with me and is working on this school intruder film, and knew that I was an expert in the area of that topic, and it basically said, would you be willing to consult on like 8 scenes or something, and basically tell us technically if we have this right. So David and I hit it off, and I come into this, and I'm not nervous at all, because it's like, well, if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. I wasn't planning on this. And we just had so much fun, and he's such a brilliant guy. And we ended up co-writing the entire script. We co-wrote it and co-directed this entire film. And it was so much fun for me. And he told me toward the end, he said, I love working with you. I wish he's about 70, I'm 45. He said, I wish we would have had our careers line up at the same time so we could have done other things together. And I just thought that was such a compliment. And I had so much fun doing it. And I remember we're going through, and he's like, okay, what is the slug line? Or like, where's I'm like, I don't have any background in this. I'm like, I'm not. You've made movies, like, you've done this. I've watched movies. So he's like, okay, I'll teach you. And it was amazing because he taught me. He's like, here's how to do this. And if you're going to pan over, like, here's how you set this up, and here's what the scene. And then I would share things back on my expertise. I'm like, well, I think we need to have where we can hear what's happening in the person's mind. So how do we do that? Like, what's a thought bubble that someone narrates? He's like, okay, here's how we do that. And we just, again, we worked so well. We did this entire thing in like probably 3 months. And then, I started into the podcast, and he was able to connect me up with the publishing house. And I had this idea for the book about September 11th. And I said, I think everyone there's been a lot written about the boat rescue, 500,000 people in 9 hours. And there's this movie coming out, Dunkirk, from 1940, which is kind of similar to that in some ways. But I said, there's big pieces of this that people are missing that no one has ever written about. And I said, I'd like to approach this in a different way. So I put this whole book proposal together and worked with a publishing house, and they loved it. And they gave me a contract. And again, I'm thinking, I thought if I do anything, I probably would write and self-publish. But no, they gave me a contract. And it was a weird thing because I didn't take the advance. I said, no, just put it in escrow, just keep it. And when I give you the final product, I mean, it's just kind of old school. It's just the way that I was. I'm like, I didn't want the pressure over me too. I'm like, just, I'll submit the book, it'll be done. And then at that point, give me that advance and the contract that we had worked out. But it was validating too. I love writing. I've been able to connect now with the like experts around the world in different theories. And I talked to the head of military medicine, and I've gotten to know him. I was actually on vacation, and another expert had sent me some follow-up information, said, hey, I came across this, thought it might help your work. It was ironic. Last night I interviewed someone who was an officer in the war with Iraq, and was talking about some of the leadership activities. And there was a specific example that he gave that I'm incorporating into the book. But yeah, you get to meet these incredible people, and like being on your show, I mean, is something would have never been there for me because I wouldn't have had the time. I wouldn't have had the reflection. And two, like, you would have been scrutinized if you do anything like this, in that organization. Even when I did the public television presentation, which was, I had nothing, no fiscal gain or anything from that. It was 37 pages of citations. It was empirical. Like I said, here's what people need to know. That's not rhetoric. It's not coming from the news and all of that stuff, like the actual research. Some people definitely resented me for doing that, because it was taking a little bit of limelight, I'm thinking. And it was kind of like, your job isn't to do this. Your job is to do this. I'm like, oh, this is like a hobby. I did this like at home, but yeah, all these interesting things, and I've done expert witness stuff in some legal cases. So because I know this so well from the other side, the attorneys, contact me and say, we have this case and we want to run it by you. And I'm working right now in a case out of Ohio. And again, it's not high stress at all because I know it. I'm easygoing, and if I feel like it's something that is going against the grain with me, I'll exit. And I haven't had to do that, but I have that built into the agreement. It's like I would exit if I felt,
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds you let go of that attachment to, this is what it has to be. This is my title and I have to function a certain way. And suddenly you opened up and all this stuff came to you. And it sounds like you're having fun with whatever you're doing, which is huge, right? Because if we love what we're doing, then even putting a lot of energy towards it doesn't feel stressful. It doesn't, feel that your life has to end otherwise. You still keep your other priorities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funniest thing too is this past year I bought a pair of all red running shoes, and
Excellent.
So like somebody saw me and they're like, are those all red shoes? I'm like, yes, they are. And I wear glasses. And my glasses have skulls on the outside, and they're on each side. And they're really cool looking actually. And someone's like, they noticed that, they're like, you have skulls on your glasses? I said, yeah, I like this frame, and it just happened to be this Ed Hardy or whatever, who's a tattoo artist, and so like that's kind of my thing. And not that I've gone with this total alter ego or anything, but it's kind of fun. And I love biking. I bought this beautiful bike, probably like 8 years ago. And the most I ever biked was like 5-6 miles. And I would consider that a long bike trek, and I would be all worn out. I might do that a couple times this summer. And then now I'll go out and I'll bike. And I sent a photo right after I got done, I think about a week or 2 weeks ago. And I'll do like 70, 80 miles. And I'll just do that. I'll pack up my bike with, everything that I need, the beef jerky, the water, the Swedish fish. And I mean, there's this whole thing. And,
Swedish fish.
yes. And I'll go out on these country roads and, make sure, my wife knows where I'm at, in case anything, would happen that can find me. But it's so peaceful, and I'll stop and I'll take pictures of just the scenery, and it is so self-reflective. And I find myself just appreciating, feeling the sun on my shoulders, hearing the crickets, and just, again, the panorama of beauty, which is a soybean field, which is growing. And the next time you bike past it, and even the little bit of burn in your thighs as you're biking, but then that goes away after a while. And there's actually, there's a cemetery I stop at as kind of a break point on my way out. And there's a gravestone, and it's off on its own, and it's of a young boy, and it's always kind of decorated up with things that would be. He was about 10. He passed away a couple of years ago. Had some significant disabilities. Actually, I looked up the name and found the obituary, but it's kind of this ritual where I stop at his gravestone, and there's this big boot, this cement boot there, and again, little windmills and stuff like that, and I just kind of stop and pause and just say a prayer, and just an acknowledgement, and then I move on with take a couple swigs of water and things like that, and stretch and move on. And again, it's this reflection point for me, and I didn't know. I didn't seek this area out. I just happened to go through, and this was a pause point for me on my trip. And all of a sudden, I saw off this one gravestone. But yeah, I love this. I love biking. How my body feels. I'm energized, and I'm just so aware of my environment, and also my own body. Like, I can feel the pressure of your feet pressing down on the pedals. And as the different scents too, as corn gets to be a little closer to being harvested, there's a sweetness that comes off the fields. It's so amazing. It's like I was going through life at full speed, with the windows down, and I had no idea what was happening until 2014, when I stopped the car, jumped out, and just started running down this road of life.
Cool. I think you have poetry in you too. That's your next your next thing. Write poetry. I love how you describe your experiences. So cool. Yeah. And again, you have come to that place of how moving your body is calming your mind, and bringing that reflection and stuff. And I feel that's such an important lesson to bring across too, because the society is so sedentary, and it just feels a lot of stress comes from the body not being able to get rid of it, it's that nervous energy, and then bringing in that mindfulness of observing nature. And I so relate to you with the biking. I actually rode my bicycle from San Diego to Eugene, Oregon and back at one point, and it was for a long time my daily routine to just jump on the bike in the morning, and you ride your 50 miles, and you come back and it's like, yep, ready for the day, Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's been absolutely, wonderful to do that. And right now, with my daughters, they have an interest in basketball. And early, when I coached basketball, I was 16 years old, and the middle school in my hometown, which is a small hometown, they couldn't find anyone to coach middle school basketball, so we weren't going to have the program. So I stepped forward. I was 16, and I said, I'll coach. And so I coached this team, and I did it for 5 years, and it was a great experience for me. I love doing it. And now my daughters are interested in basketball, so I'm getting to do that coaching role again, in a fun way. Instead of saying, let's do some shots around the world, and making sure that dad doesn't always win, so
Good.
and here's how to dribble, and here's some of the things, but real lighthearted. And they ask me, they'll like say, can we go to the the park today and play basketball? So I know that they love doing it, and I have fun, and I love that they're seeking out, what's interesting to them. They both dance, and they're both very, very different. My one daughter loves to read, and will read through, book after book after book after book. And my other daughter is also very much, into reading, but is equally into like sports, and will be the one that will want to go outside and do more. Can we practice my softball or things like that? But yeah, and the other thing is, stuff doesn't get to me you're on such a hair trigger when you're in that corporate world, and that stress in that next phone call or opening up that email. And I'd come in the morning and it'd be like, oh my goodness, that light would be flashing of like the voicemail. And we did a trip to Disney this past March, and it was the first time I'd ever been to Disney World. Like, I went through 5 states I never even went through. I mean, because like tennis, I drove. I wanted to drive because I wanted to do reconnaissance. I wanted to see some things like Paducah. I know the Civil War, the Battle of Paducah. I wanted to just like go through there. So we drove to Florida, and the drive was fine. Like, I loved it. And I remember on the I-4, they were doing construction. So the I-4, Interstate 4, right outside Orlando, pretty crazy. And we're sitting there kind of like just stopped, and then you go forward 5 feet and then you stop. And what I realized, I'm sitting there and I wasn't tense. Like, I rolled the windows down, and it was like 82 degrees outside. We left, it was 41 in Wisconsin. And I'm like, oh, it's just like so nice out here. And, in an hour or two, we're going to be getting our exit, and we're going to be going into Disney. But how that would have been for me, I would have been angry. I would have had probably, not like a road rage type person, but I would have just been frustrated. It would have ruined my day, and it would have carried over into supper, and maybe would have kept me up a little bit later at night. But no, I was totally, and I was so in the moment in Disney, and I just was there, I loved Disney. I loved being with, my family and everything that we did. And the pictures, we put together a book on Shutterfly afterwards for all of us. And you can just see it. It's there. And that experience with my daughters. And had I done this again previously, like 5 years ago, I would have never been there. I would have been there physically. I'd be in the pictures. You wouldn't see it in my eyes. I wouldn't have been there. And that's the difference. And so anyone out there making these changes, and how hard they are, again, walking the Walmart and sitting down, and I struggle too, again, with the dissertation. I think my mind was, you're just so out of routine, and I struggle with this dissertation, which was this, again, weird, humility, I guess is the word. I met with my advisor, and I said, and he's like, Dave, he's like, he goes, you're a smart guy. This isn't coming together for you. He goes, you need to maybe meet with some people. So I scheduled an appointment with the Reading Center on campus, UW-Madison, the Reading Center. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I've been published, I've been all this stuff, and I'm going to the Reading Center. It was in the middle of winter again. I have my backpack, and I'm going across campus. 40,000 people on campus, not a soul out. It is like cold and windy, and there's like Lake Mendota again. This, just this wind is hitting you, and kind of almost like forcing you to say, like, to yourself, is this really worth it? All these points of like, do you really want to keep doing this? And I got there, and I'm working with these people, and they were wonderful. They were absolutely just saints in helping me. And they're saying, you're not making good transitions from paragraph to paragraph. Here's some ways to do that. And this is different, because I used to just like memos for people and just like get the information down. And I'm so thankful for those people. But yeah, I had to step back. And the other part is you have to let people help you, because you can't, in the role that I was at, when you're in this administrative role, high paying, hundreds of people underneath you and all of that, you really can't ask people to help you, because then I think the perception is, well, does David not know what he's doing? Like, you have to present that you always know what's happening. So to ask for help and to just flat out say, I don't know how to transition into this paragraph between this and this. Can you help me? And people are like, yeah. And that's another thing that happened in my life, is just the willingness. And as I started to podcast, like, another podcaster reached out to me and said, I can help you, like, set up your audio. I can totally do that. So here's like how to do this. Here's what gain is. Here's like this, and here's some software to use. So I think that ability to be vulnerable is something else that really came forward in me. And I don't ever feel hurt. Like, if someone offers to help, where 5 years ago, again, that probably would have been, I would have felt, I don't know if I would have felt insulted. I probably would have felt like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what is, oh my goodness, someone is seeing this deficit in me that I'm overlooking. So what is it? So yeah, I don't know. But like I said, the Disney trip was awesome. I'm so glad. And yet, like, someone said to me, you could have been 60, you could have retired at 65. Your kids would have kids. You would have just been worn down by all of this. You would have never had that experience. Are you going to go to Disney then? And
don't you think it's a really common thread that people say, oh, I do that when I'm retired, and then it never happens?
Yeah.
Because, yeah. So
I think so.
Would you can you put together in a nutshell, like, your advice to somebody who is on the edge, who is like living a life where they feel that's not serving them anymore? Their feelings that stress, they're knowing that some is different out there. What would be your advice from somebody who has made the jump and has come out very well on the other side?
Yeah. I would say first, trust your gut feeling. And I talk about this a lot in my research. Actually, in my dissertation, I studied a lot of military studies and high stakes decision making, because actually for me, this was a high stakes decision. And trust your gut feeling. If your gut is telling you that this isn't a match, and if your body, if your doctor, I mean, it's very easy. I mean, are you overweight? Are you sedentary? Do you look in a mirror and it's not the person that you want to be? If those are all the things, then get out. I mean, don't even think twice, because if you have a heart attack, if you have a stroke, I mean, or just redundant illnesses, and you're not living life to the fullest, it's not worth it. It's absolutely just not worth it. So if you feel that, trust that tacit knowledge. That tacit knowledge is very strong within your body. And talk to people. I think that's the other thing, is find what I would call member checks. And in research, I have, it's a research term. Member checks means people in the field that know the topic that you're studying, who you can show them your research and say, what do you think about this? Am I on or off? And they'll tell you, like, exactly. They'll be honest with you. Versus people who, like in my position, people would never be honest with me because you were the superior. I mean, you were the boss. You controlled so many things in their lives that you would only get the positive transference from them. But have member checks, people you can sit down with and say, what do you really see? And don't be offended by that. And don't be offended with them if they say to you, like, your emails are really negative, or like, you don't look well. And then the part is, how do you get from, okay, if you're going to make that break, it's not as bad as what you think it's going to be. When you make it, I mean, for me, I felt liberated, even though it's this unknown. There's a lot of great things in the unknown that you're driving by, again, through life right now, and you're not even realizing. So I think that member check, someone to honestly tell you, and if you're not feeling it, and there isn't a way that it's going to change, the part that probably erodes that no one pays attention to is your health. You just start to lose that. And I could visibly see it when I saw that presentation of myself on PBS. And the strange thing for me is, like, I don't remember the day that I left. I don't remember a lot of the things. There's like no anniversary on a calendar of this is the date that I left in the hour, and I don't have that. But something that sticks with me is every year on May 22nd, I know that I did that PBS presentation, and I know, thousands of, or tens or hundreds of thousands of people had watched that. And I didn't represent I mean, the content is really good, but I look at myself and the image is just horrifying because I see someone who's literally dying, has high blood pressure and all of this stuff, and is just there, and in body is dying, and no matter what, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And had I gone down that path, it would have been so stupid to have a heart attack when you have a family and my kids growing up in the things that we're doing now, and imagine not being a part of this.
Right.
And for me and for myself, of taking care of just how I feel better, of being able to get out and bike, and I love it, versus coming in and being so winded and just like sweat coming off because it's you can't even bike 5-6 miles. You don't have the capacity. So, and I love your show, and I love the guests that you have on, because a lot of I got rid of so much stuff that it just doesn't mean anything to, like CDs and music CDs and stuff like that. I'm like, well, I don't listen to a lot of these anyway, and someone else can listen to them. And I can, if I want stuff, I'll get the things that I need. But you don't need as much in life, and these status symbols are ridiculous. That's another thing. So I go through the cemetery, and I'd see these big stones, these massive stones, and I'd ask myself, if that person in that grave could be out of that grave and standing next to me today, and they look at the stone, would they be like, boy, that's a petty thing that all these resources were put into this massive granite monument to me versus somewhere else? And as I told my wife, and I said, when I pass away, I would be cremated and put my remains into this biodegradable container and off in this location, and that's it. And I said, because I don't believe in things like that. I guess.
Yeah, needing to show it. You said two things which really struck me. And one is, here you are, a researcher, and you have a PhD on, the safety aspect and everything. And you just said, follow your gut. And usually people say, oh, that's just omigome. That's also as fluffy hippies, which are talking about their gut feeling. And I think that that's such a powerful advice, because I think deep down, we always know if a situation is serving us or not. And, like you said, I love also the term about being laminated to your job description, because you can push those feelings down a lot. And I'm sure while you were in that job, there were many times where you knew this was stressful, this was not good for you, but you had to keep up that position for whatever reason. So I totally love that. And then the other thing I wanted to throw in, a lot of people which work with dying find that the number one regret of people is that they didn't spend enough time with people they love and with things they love. So nobody regrets not having worked more.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
My godfather passed away. Again, shortly after, I had left this position, and I remember too, just my respect for him, and he had a great sense of humor, and that was another part too. When you have people who I would say are in your corner, like Connie, a person who was always like complimenting me, and just as a friend, we got along so well for so many years, and my godfather. And when you start to lose people out of your corner, I guess, I mean, you're always introducing hopefully new people into your corner, but it's always this reflection point too of like, I'm glad I had the time with them. Did I really give as much time to them as I could? And I don't want to live with that regret. And again, I don't feel regret right now. I feel that the change happened early enough in my life that, and I learned, I learned from what happened. I learned what I don't want to go back to. It's like, I can sense it now if I get close to it. And it's even like when I work on my book, my book has gotten really, really technical. And it wasn't initially going to go that way, but it's okay. But there's even times in the book when I'll back off and I'll say, I don't want to make this into a research study because this isn't really where I want to go and take on that stress of that. But yeah, I mean, I can sense things that I don't want to get into. People will say like, well, here's a position that's open and this would be like great for you and you can step into this. And I'm like, no, like I'm fine. I'm totally fine where I'm at. And I don't know. You can sense it. So yeah, trust your gut. And there's studies. There's military studies. David Klein did studies with a military researcher in the 1980s, millions and millions of dollars, and comes down, trusting your gut. And that again, we have this tacit knowledge, and you're going to survive. I mean, you're going to land on your feet, and you're going to realize talents that were open to you, and things that transfer, and experiences that you have are going to help you. And I think the other part too, and I said it, is things start flowing into you that you never even thought of. Like, I never thought I'd work on a Hollywood movie. I mean, that's ridiculous. And yet I did, and it was fun, and it was successful. And had it just not been a match, no problem, that's fine. But yeah, to stay in something that doesn't make you happy, the value of happiness is immense. I never realized that before. I never valued happiness. I didn't even probably surface knowledge, I guess, of happiness, but I'm truly happy, I would say right now in life. I'm truly happy picking dandelions out of my yard, shoveling them out and looking at the yard afterwards, or, after spending some time with my family, after doing a podcast, talking with neighbors, just whatever, and again, you're so much, you gain this insightfulness. If you're shopping at a store or something, you see somebody reaching up for something, you go over and say, hey, can I help you with that? 5 years ago, I wouldn't even notice that. I would have been so focused on myself, what I was doing, and just the in and out, because I have to get this, now I have to get back, I've got to log in, got to get to my email. And so this office is kind of weird too. Like it is both, I guess now it's a studio, but it was almost like a prison to come down here. And it embodied everything that was going on. I mean, it was a basement. It was dark. It had like dark images around it, and I've totally refreshed it now too to be the studio that's productive and creative for me. And I spent a fraction of the time down here than what I did before. But it was, yeah. So actually, the space itself even transformed.
Cool. So we talked about a lot, David. Is there something else you want to get off your chest?
Oh, sure. Let me just take a second, go through some of the things that I had written up, just see if there's anything that I think one of the things is, just in closing, I mean, you're definitely, any change has anxiety with it. So be prepared for that and think ahead of saying, I'm going to have anxiety, and this is how life will probably be the first 2 weeks after. This is how life will probably be the first month after. And then 6. And I think you start thinking, projecting out. And it's okay to go down this route of where, you read about Zen and you try to find the answers in books that other people have written, because I think you pull pieces out of that reflectively. And there isn't any book that's going to tell you like how to move on in life. But again, you get pieces out of other people's stories, other people's work. I just think to delaminate is so important for people. And I actually want to focus somehow more of my work later in life in that capacity, in helping people delaminate. I'm not sure what that looks like for me. It's just, I think I have a good ability to do that and to help people reflect, and maybe shift a little more of my podcast into that agency and purpose. But no, I'm glad. And like I said, it's a very difficult decision to come to, but, it's one of these things. If you're like my friend Connie and you all of a sudden, have terminal cancer and that's it, I mean, and you're gone, that could happen to any of us. And I don't know. I would much rather make the choice to do something that's happy. It doesn't mean that you're going to be without money and other things. I mean, there's going to be a change. I don't make this massive salary that I made before, but through some of these projects, I do fine. And again, you realize what you really need. And it's like, too, going through that cemetery, it's like all of these people, they left everything behind. When you die, it's not like you take things with you.
Yeah.
So what do you really need? I mean, and what you need, I think, is to be kind to other people and to even, as you check out in a store, to say hi and to thank you to someone and stuff like that, and just that kindness. Or if there's a storm that comes through that, you go over and you pick up sticks from your neighbor's lawn if they're elderly, or fire up the snowplow when you're doing your driveway if there hasn't been done yet. I had a neighbor who had dialysis, would have to leave, and she's since passed about 2 years ago. But I would go and always make sure like that her driveway was cleaned out. And she just said, it's just such a peace of mind for me because I didn't, I would have to be picked up for dialysis and things like this. And I said, no, don't worry about it. I'm just glad to do it. And that's the way my dad was. I took a lot of lessons. My dad was, whenever there was a snowfall, we lived in a community when I grew up that had World War II veterans and a lot of spouses or a lot of widows. And my dad was a school principal, and he would go out at night and he'd drag me with him, and we'd have our grain shovels and we'd be scooping, snow out northern Wisconsin, cleaning off all these driveways and sidewalks. And he did it because it was the right thing to do. I mean, you give that because you always give forward. And I didn't realize it until I went through this. I didn't realize it until I was 40 some years old that when I was with my dad, of what he was really doing and what he was teaching me, I was out there because my dad was basically making me be out there do that. Now I'm like, oh, what a gift for me to be out there and to be helping these other people. And how much that meant to them, and just yeah. So you this retrospection that comes in, introspection, that you never do in life, reflection without being negative. That's one of the things I talk about in these 9/11 studies and stuff like that, and the Murrah building. At the end, you always get to the part in a study where it's like, here's the people to blame. Here's the people that did things wrong. Here's the communication system that failed. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sick of that. So when I write, I'm like, I look at the process and I'm like, here's how the process went. And if you understand the process, the outcome doesn't matter. Just if you can improve the process, the outcome naturally will produce better outcomes. So don't worry about assigning blame in all of this. Just improve the process. So if you improve the process of your life, like you get out, you get fit, you're nicer to people, things like that, the outcome, you're going to be happier. The people around you are going to be happier. It's this win-win all the way around. But it's hard, but do it. I never thought this would be me at age 45. I never thought this would be me. And this is the greatest thing ever.
So cool, David. Thank you so much. You gave us so much to think about and so much good advice. I love it. I love it. Thank you. I really, really appreciate you coming on. And you know what? Since I have you now in front of the public soon, will you come back some other time and do some hands-on maybe preparedness stuff too?
Yeah. I would love to do that.
Cool. We have you on tape.
Yeah. Bring me back at any time, because definitely that's where I help people. And one of the things too is, safety doesn't have to be as scary as what people are making it out to be.
I know, and you have a real gift with that. But I don't want to take away from this really powerful message you gave today, because you have really talked so much about inner sustainability, and I feel, especially in a time like we're living in right now, there's so much fear out there and so much uncertainty. And what you have given with your own story to people is so many tools how to get to that clarity of what do we want to do? What do we want to focus on? So I think it's so powerful. And thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I pull that out of the other guests that you have on your show. When I listen, I hear pieces from them of their reflective moments, and it helps me to think about my life and so thank you so much for the work that you do with your show.
Oh, thank you, and vice versa. All right, take care.
Good, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, David.
All right.
That was
I loved it.
wonderful.
I loved it. I had a great time. So I hope this is what you were anticipating.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I didn't know how powerful insights you're sharing. This was more than I
Oh,
anticipated. So, yeah, I mean, you have really come to s- find so many tools of getting over said anxiety, and I really feel so many people right now in the world are completely lost. It's just so much fear and anger and negativity swirling around. And yeah, go for that bike ride and notice the corn growing or see the snow, because that's, I think, the way we can really change the world is by being mindful and not putting this negative energy out. So, yeah, I think that's a extremely important message.
oh
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. Again, I love this, and yeah, at some point, if you want me to come back and talk about uh, something safety, and one of the areas I focus on a lot in safety is I, I do not advocate schools or businesses doing these intruder drills where they storm in and they have people done up in blood and all of this stuff. That this high drama. Um, there's actually lawsuits that are coming out on that. People being PT, post traumatic stress injury, or else cumulative stress injury. One thing I do too is I'm a debriefer for the county sheriff's department, so I get called in if there's been a serious accident. I'll sit down with first responders and I'll lead them through so they can get their thoughts together and that they can move on with their life, which is an interesting story for another time. But yeah, so I tell people, I'm like, don't do drills like this. I mean, do tabletops. It's just as effective, and you're just traumatizing people. We don't do this for fire drills. We don't set a hallway
On
trash cans
fire.
on fire or a tornado. We don't put a barn fan and throw gravel through it as if you're getting so. But people do it because there's just this illusion that this is the way to prepare, and it's really not. It's mindfulness, it's situational awareness, and that's this whole thing on 9/11. This boat rescue, none of this was ever practiced, yet you rescue 500,000 people in 9 hours. Well, people knew what to do. This tacit knowledge and this system just kind of forms. But when you get people, you try to convince people to be very linear and nonlinear events, like this run, hide, fight, which is really bad advice. Um, so when I did the movie with David Opst, like there's not a shot ever fired. It's verbally de-escalated, which the majority of school intruder situations are. They're verbally de-escalated without a shot. So we kept it very true to what the research was, not per this drama of somebody coming in and shooting 1,000 bullets and people being shot up. That is totally not what this was all about. So I think that's a point when people get what they perceive as what's happening around them. And yeah, it's really fascinating to talk about that. So at some later time, and then just to um, I did a lot of research between the years 1980 and 85 about what was happening contextually in society with the Cold War Strategic Defense Initiative being announced by Reagan in 83. So people living at that time, um, that changed from this whole mutually assured destructive position where you wouldn't have war because both sides would be destroyed. But all of a sudden now, if you have SDI, you could be first strike because you could take out the Soviet Union, their missiles, before they ever left the silos. So it changed this whole position too, and just the anxiety. And you start to see it then in music, like Nena, 99 Red Balloons, Sting had a song, I Hope the Russians Love Their Children Too. So it just started to saturate, and just this, how it affected people in 1980 to 1985. It's really interesting because that's the group of people who were rescued, that they were growing up in their formative years. That's the people that were rescued during 9/11. So I talk about this whole transference of how that experience from 80 to 85 is what caused this rescue to be so successful, because these people had been just absolutely terrified into this blind faith into military. And when the Twin Towers were struck and everything, that this transference happened because they saw the Coast Guard, some of the Coast Guard vessels, and you didn't have to convince them; they already knew. And I don't think it would be that way today. Like the disasters actually today have a different response. People are much more individualized because the mobile communications are so reliable. Like the Fukushima nuclear disaster, I talked to some people in Japan. So anyway, it's real interesting.
It is very interesting.
So,
and it's funny because, I mean, that's the time when I came here, and I definitely was affected by it because in Germany, we felt like, oh, those two want to get it on and they're going to fight right here. I grew up right next to the border to East Germany. So the fence and the border, mines going off and all of that stuff was my reality, right?
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So when, the rhetoric went to kind of, it was like escalating. It was very scary times. It's like, yeah, those two are not going to fight on their own. So it's going to happen right here. It was definitely a reason to kind of like, because like when you grow up with the, whole World War II reality, you always go, why did Jewish people not leave? Didn't they see the writing on the wall?
Right.
But it's very hard to see the writing because, it could be paranoia or it could be not, so it's a thing. Yeah.
And I talk about that in my book because on 9/11, for an average of 4 minutes, most people did nothing in the Twin Towers after the first tower was struck. Mm-hmm. And Amanda Ripley's a researcher, and she wrote about this, interviewed, I think, 400 people who had evacuated. But it was 4 minutes. And they would see debris falling past the windows, but it was this, they couldn't process that this was outside of this torus or this thing of normal. And, again, you talk about, why didn't Jewish people leave during World War II? Well, yeah, you get comfortable, you get within this torus. And it's like, even if a hurricane, less and less people leave now because of hurricanes, they just don't evacuate because they figure I'll weather it. And if they weather one,
then they think it's,
I'll weather every other one, and it doesn't work that way. So yeah, it's getting people to. It's really hard to shift out of this what I call it's a term. It's torus, and I've done a lot of research in that area, and that was actually a benefit of 9/11 was it was so extreme that it just rocketed people out of their torus, where they had what was called basically a Hobson's choice. You could either go to the harbor because you couldn't go north of the towers. You could either go to the harbor or you could just stay put, and this ash is coming down on you, and it's still an ongoing event. You don't know if there's additional attacks. So the harbor is your only option. When that happens, life becomes a lot easier. So the more chaos in life, actually, the better your opportunities are for making decisions. They get narrowed down. Dr. Paul Rapp was telling me a story. He said there was head of military medicine. He said there was this community downstream of a dam, and the dam was weakened and it could fail. And then they had these meetings. What do we do? Like, do we shore up the dam? Do we evacuate the city? And this went on for like a week or so. And finally, the dam just collapsed. City's surrounded by water. And now it's like, okay, now your choices are easy.
Right. Evacuate. We get out of here. I know.
You get out of here, you go to the highest point. That's the only two things that you have going for you right now. So it's that whole thing too, where people fear chaos, but actually chaos is really a great thing when it comes to decision making. But yeah, situational awareness, people just are so ingrained. And I talked about it, when we talked today, I'd never realized I had no situational awareness with my body until I actually saw myself that one day on TV, so.
Yeah. So I mean, it was very powerful. I hope the listeners hearing what I was hearing, and yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing it. And this is the first time I've ever told this. And I after listening to your show, I really felt like I could do this discussion.
Cool.
And honestly, I've never included this in a podcast. It's been guarded. I felt it was time to share it because there's other people who are facing similar things. And
For sure. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I so feel there are so many people which want to do things differently, but they feel so stuck. And you put it like so clearly, how you basically, I love the term of being laminated to your professional image, because even, I mean, you got out early, but the divorce rate of the retirees is really high because men leave their job and suddenly they don't know who they are. They have not created any life besides that job identity. And, it's just so interesting to look at all of that. And I don't know if you listened to the episode with Diego, but he came to mind when you were talking about how you define yourself as when people ask you who you're a father, all these other things which are important and not, I'm the director of student relations,
Yes. Yeah.
And Diego did the same thing where he prepared. It sounds more like you left because you were more at a breaking point where it was you need to go. So, and Diego kind of prepared like for a year to make the transition out into, and he's a podcaster too. So maybe it's podcasters which gets an awareness, so we just talk it out and get clarity and stuff. And, I really believe men didn't have such choice like maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago. I think we have come to a place where we realize that gender roles we had and that definition of what you have to do in life has not been serving us that well, so it's really interesting.
Oh, yeah. I still have colleagues, that in the profession, and it's amazing. And I didn't mention this because I don't want to single them out or anything, but it's amazing. I'll meet with them, and they have aged. They're one, his hair is all white. He has a lot of wrinkles. He's put on some. I mean, they just the toll, and it's kind of like if you go into the presidency. You look
you always come out with white hair.
Yeah, you're never the same person coming out. And I look at these, and I'm like, oh, I just feel so bad that you don't see what's happening to you. And I don't know. I have this other thing. I think I refer to it sometimes as the radiation theory. And I just said, I think people can only be in some of these positions for so long, and then you have to exit and go to something else. Because I just think that negativity coming in, which everybody brings to you, it just overwhelms.
For sure. Definitely. Well, thank you so much. I will be in touch with you, to see. And did you record it with audio or with video?
I did it with video. So I have, I have the full, I actually have split screen set up, so it's both you and I, and so yeah.
So if you decide that we want to put it up on YouTube, we can do that too. We have a YouTube channel, or you can use it for your own purposes. However, yeah, and I will let you know as soon as a podcast is coming up. And if there are any more pictures you want to send, feel free. Yeah. If you want to send, like if you go out bicycling and have some nature shot, or as a shot of the gravestone or that would be cool too.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll do that. I take a number of pictures, and then I'll take one of that gravestone.
Yeah, I think that would really bring it home, because that's such a imagery, to really relate to, like, yeah. Those people can't do anything anymore, and you can't take it with you, Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because a lot of people really only get to the point where you got to when they are diagnosed with some extreme illness, and really, do we need to wait for that excuse? So, yeah, very good. I'm so glad you jumped out of it, did the stuff, and I can really relate. I had a store for years, which I really didn't want to be there, but it was like, okay, I couldn't, and I developed cancer. So, I did have that excuse of like, okay, let's let go certain things, but it's not easy to change your life completely and to jump to the other side. So I really loved how you gave so many, tips and insights on how to move through that transition and come out okay, better than before.
Yeah, it's amazing, and yeah, I hope people can do introspection and reflection. Just two things. And when I did my dissertation work, I sat down with people and I would interview them. And one of the questions I always had was, do you ever reflect on your own like personal happiness and stuff? And everyone was like, no, I never do that. And I had this whole sidebar, but I left it out of the dissertation. But I said, these people have completely lost a sense of their own identity outside of work, and they recognize it, but they can't really do they're not doing anything about it. And one person cried. I was interviewing in my dissertation. Another administrator just broke down, and of course, I cut that out of the transcription and all of that, but just out of the blue, I wasn't expecting it, just completely shattered, and just said, I'm not the parent that I want to be. And we were just talking in general about, how do you reflect? Does the stress go home with you? And then does it affect your decision making the next day? Because, after a big sentinel event happens, some decision, how long does it take before you kind of can put that behind you? And they just lost it. And I basically kind of consoled that person for like 10 minutes and said, what you're telling me is what everybody's telling me. So at least you can commiserate knowing that that's
you're not alone.
Feeling.
Yeah.
And then, but yet they have to come up with some kind of answer. But I felt so bad. And again, I went through my questions. I listened to my interview questions, and in no way was I leading this person up to this point. It was
no,
just boom.
But I ventured to say that a lot of people or subconsciously don't ask themselves those questions, because if they do, then you have to face the answers. Meaning, no, I'm not showing up as a parent like I want to. I'm not happy. Because I really feel like, that's why I was so happy when you were talking about the gut feeling and stuff, because I think this is what a lot of people lock up and close up to be able to continue in their, laminated positions because once you ask yourself, once you know the truth about your situation, once you know that you're, honestly, I'm unhappy, I don't like this, blah, 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 then you have to do something about it. Or you add another layer of guilt. So I really believe people don't ask themselves those questions. So just your question was probably like opening the gates of like, oh my God, what am I doing? So yeah, very interesting.
It definitely was scary. And as I said, walking, under the fluorescent lights and then just walking as almost at zombie mode in winter. And again, it didn't feel bad. The walking outside, the walking in the Walmart was kind of awkward. That was the transition to realizing I needed to walk outside in nature, not in this artificial environment. But I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel anything. I just had this. I just kept walking and hours and come back, and then eventually, again, the mind started to perceive what was going on, and then from that, the introspection started and the reflection. And the point where I could start to feel confident enough to do my member checks and approach people and say, "Hey, yeah." So yeah, one of my good friends, I just remember, I'm like, be totally honest with me. They're like, "Wow, like you are so out of control and just such an egomaniac." I'm like, "Wow, that's not how I would have described myself." Because but they're like, "Yeah, you totally, But at the same time, you get affirmed for that because you start to rise. And I remember like people telling me they wanted to be like me. And I teach college classes of its aspiring administrators. So I would teach them. And I still do that. I mean, it's much different though, much more easygoing. But But yeah, I remember.
While still
that.
teaching it, might be good to teach how to put in some safety checks for your own personal stuff, because it's there. I feel there are so many industries which are flawed, and a little bit of that, I think, is also an American thing. At least I don't know. Obviously, I've been gone from Germany for a long time, but still, people get way more personal vacation time. Like you start working, you get 4 to 6 weeks vacation, paid vacation a year.
Oh, wow.
And most people here, if they get a week or 2 weeks, is a lot, and there's just a much bigger safety net, and also much more of a realization that a rested mind is a much more creative mind.
Yes.
And can find solutions and can work better. So there's even a law there that like your boss can't contact you via email or voice message or anything outside of working hours.
Wow.
Yeah. So you leave your job, and then this is your life, and you can recuperate, you come back, and then you're fresh and you're happy to go to work. And, and people have been, even if the company is not doing so well, they would keep the workers because they would realize, the value experienced workers have, that when things go better again, there are people that, it was on a radio show where they talked about, it was a German company which was making like huge engines for all kinds of different things they were shipping all over the world. And so they did and made a mistake which had been done 20 years before, a long time before.
Sure.
And the worker was still there and could recognize it and fix it and save like millions of dollars,
Oh, wow.
And so they were talking about it, how much value they have into their people. And this is really not the case here for the most part. You're kind of disposable, like you're not valued in your position as a director, and everybody wants to make sure that you're stress-free and healthy and have the time to go and exercise every day and be with your family. It's like, no, what can you do? Come, work, So yeah, I mean, it's really, I really see some newer companies coming up and having that more in their setup, not just sustainability in terms of environment, but the sustainability in terms of personal lives of their workers. And I'm really hoping we make that shift, because if we don't, we just create also unhealthy, angry people, And I mean, like, you found the walking and did all of that, but how many people which are in a situation of personal insecurity find drugs? I mean, we have this crazy heroin epidemic, and I think a lot of it is from not being connected to yourself, just needing something, feeling overwhelmed with life. And yeah, so anyways, we can talk a few more hours, but you might need to check on your water situation. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And I will let you know.
Okay.
And then we plan, maybe in half a year or something like that to do another show with a different angle, kind of check in and then go for some different topics. That would be great.
Yeah. I would look, definitely forward to that. And today was wonderful. So I appreciate the time with you.
Thank you. Take care, David.
Okay. Yes, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.